Do we have a name for this series yet?
Nope.
Okay. All right.
So give it a second so we can.
So editor meeting up top. Okay, hi. Hello, I'm Loren Taylor. Got another installment of this, basically not brand new series. It's even so new we don't really even have quite a format for it yet. But this is a really interesting series of discussions that we have been having with Brother Kamm Howard. He is the co-chair, the male co-chair of NCOBRA. This is a National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. And I'm also joined here by Brother Troy 5X from the Collective 9, who has been really spearheading, creating a forum for us to have these type of discussions. You can say this is kind of like a little mini discussion that I wanted to have, really like as a three-way. We've got an upcoming election. You know, there's the midterm elections, and in a lot of places you'll also be having, you know, statewide races. Here in Illinois, we've got a really important race for governor that basically is just pitting two billionaires against each other. Now, why I wanted to have kind of this discussion, there was recently a primary election here in Illinois in March, you know, for this election. And I'm getting a bit personal with this. I actually had a situation, and it's the opportunity to, you could say, volunteer for a number of different candidates. And just in general, the experience that I had coming away from this is that I really start to just have a different attitude just about elections in general. I really kind of see this, at least this last one, really created a real big sense of division. And I really have even a feeling that some of the divisions that was created by this last election, it's going to take us really years to get over this in some of this community. So what I wanted to do really with you two brothers was just a discussion about whether or not what we as African people, you know, how we should really interface and approach or you know, interact with this, which is a decidedly kind of European convention, which in a lot of ways really does not necessarily fit with the way we do things as African people. I would contend, you know, as Africans, we're clan-based. You know, our thing is to try to come together as collectives and find solutions, not this idea of like partisan politics. So I guess let me start with you, Kamm. You know, you've spoken before about the need for us to like hold these politicians accountable. Just first of all, just give me your idea of just what you think about my general idea of elections and just this electoral process and how it impacts our community, and just, you know, what we as Black people, as African people here in the wilderness of America, you know, need to do to make that something that's effective for us.
Well, you initially stated I was a member of NCOBRA, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, male co-chair, which is correct. I'm also a member of on the steering committee of the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, and we have a lot to say about elections. In NCOBRA, not so much, but the Black is Back Coalition, we have a lot to say about elections. We understand that the election process in America is a contest, a nonviolent contest between the ruling parties to engage in who controls the state. The state apparatus is that which administers policing, administers education, administers health, and controls the economy. So the election process is who, out of the ruling white elite, controls the state. They allowed blacks to enter in that contest with them, but picking a side, either the Democrats or the Republic. So it's not one for the working class. The working class does not benefit from elections. It can have some ancillary benefits, but the goal of the elections is to benefit the white ruling class. And so when we engage the electoral system, we have to do so from that perspective, is understanding that it's not designed for us, but how can we move it in a way that our interests are looked after. We haven't did that in the last 40, 50 years at all. And so that's why we find ourselves in this situation. So I think that we are primarily unintelligent, illiterate electoral base, illiterate in understanding whether or not what the contest is all about. We may understand the Democratic Party to a certain extent. You have all these talking heads on CNN and other places who understand, who are analysts and all that, but do they understand, and maybe they do, and choose not to make people aware, our community aware, that this is really a control of the state by the two ruling classes in America, the Republican and Democrat.
Troy, not that I'm going to ask you to be, in a sense, a spokesman for any particular group, but I just know from your background and your experience, you're also coming with a particular point of view about the elections. I can mention also that you're one of the brothers that I met through the local organizing committee that is part of the Justice for Else movement. That's connected with the Nation of Islam, and I also know that Minister Farrakhan has spoken in the context of this Justice for Else movement about some need for us as a people to be involved in the electoral process, but within the context of what we as Black people should be about. And so, just what are your thoughts on that?
So, and unapologetically, I am a student of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad under the guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So, indeed, as a student, I have my perspective is definitely influenced and reflected by that, and it's in alignment with Kamm. And that, is when we're fighting a war, there's a difference from a battle, and the goal is to win the war. And so in that, there has to be strategy that's utilized, and we have to utilize all of the tools that are at our disposal so that we can win the war. And that's our people, the total liberation of our people. And so utilizing it as a tool is something that we have to and we should do, but we should never put all of our coins in the same, in the same pouch, or we should never see that that's the only way in which we should move. And one of the perspectives that I often come by is that the course of study, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan began to rebuild the nation, he put us on a course of study called Self-Improvement is the Basis of Community Development. And for me, that was one of the real big impacts that influenced me joining the nation, because it really got me to the point to really see that we have a lot more control over our current reality and what we accept as a community. We've talked about reparations, and yes, we should always hold those accountable who have helped to create the conditions and situations that we currently live in, but at the same time, we can't wait for that to happen.
That's right.
So with that, we also have to look within ourselves and within our community and see what it is that we can do currently, right now, today, so that we can improve the condition in which our people find themselves in. So I know it may seem like I'm not touching on the point, but with that is that, is operational unity is definitely a very important component. And one of the things is, as you get older, I think hopefully you become a little more mature and you begin to see that your perspective isn't the only perspective. And because I choose not to fight like you fight doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong, is that you have your place in this fight, in this struggle, and the goal that if we can come together and realize that the goal is to win the war, not every single battle. Maybe this battle is yours, maybe this battle is mine, but at the end of the day, we want the same thing. And if we can begin to see that, then we can respect the different positions that people play at the table and see their role as what it is, as long as it doesn't conflict with the total liberation of our people.
Okay, so like I said, let's make this kind of a discussion. So I really just want to open it up if there's anything that either one of you two brothers want to interject this in terms of kind of like this theme. It'd be great, whatever it is that you'd want to throw in there.
So, the control of the state, whether it's in local, state, or federal, is extremely important because public policy is crafted. How, your children go to school, what schools they go to, as we see in Chicago, is a major public policy issue with the closing of 40+ schools, 5 high schools. That's public policy. And so when you totally abandon the state or leave the state apparatus to blacks who have not vowed to fight against white supremacy, who have not vowed to fight for the total liberation of African people, you get these type of rulings, you get this type of public policy. So as a radical, as a revolutionary, as a nationalist, we can no longer leave the state to blacks who don't have a nationalist, radical, revolutionary perspective. We have to begin to put those type of candidates for these positions and put them into place so that when these type of policies that would have an extremely negative effect on our children, on our communities, there'll be a check there. There'll be men and women who will say, no, this is not going to happen the way you want it to happen, because we were put here specifically to ensure that public policy is crafted in our interest, and we don't have that. And so that's a new analysis by the nationalist radical revolutionary movement that we're attempting to push forward. We must begin to run for office, radicals, revolutionary nationalists in the local, especially in the local areas where we have.
I would have to say that was the thing that I wanted to make sure that I kind of interjected. So we're talking about any kind of like really like practical path for this. Yeah. I do think that we're really in a point of time where we probably have to concentrate more on the local type races for two primary reasons. One, in a sense, byproducts of racism in America is this idea of, racially segregated communities, right? We have, for instance, right now we're actually sitting in the location where we are now is literally the second highest concentration of African Americans in terms of congressional district. Okay, and so local races kind of give us an opportunity to do this, because then if we have, candidates from our community who are going into places where the constituency is mostly our community, then we can start talking about policies that will actually have a real effect on us. Okay. And outside of that, I'm quite honest with you, a lot of what we talk about, it should be, goal and solution oriented. But this is one where I'm kind of throwing my hands up in the air a little bit. What is the alternative to this? It's like obscene amounts of money that it requires to, do stuff like run for high executive office. I mean, how are we going to get around that?
And one of the things is that, there's two thoughts that come to mind, and I'll start first with, since you mentioned how we first met, which was with the Justice or Else movement. And many would take the perspective that that was a failed movement.
I didn't think it had. I thought it was still existing.
Right. But I mean, even after coming from the event, people had all of these things that they thought magically were going to happen from it. But what the thing is that the theme was very clear to me in the beginning, and it still is justice or else. And some people were like, well, they thought that the or else was that we were going to come back.
Everything down, right? Yeah.
But the thing is, and I think this definitely ties right into this conversation, is that justice is, fair dealing, is doing what's right, and the or else comes into part of that is holding people accountable, but part of the holding other people accountable is also holding ourselves accountable. So if we look at what being in this country, that we have no reference point that those who have helped to not only can create the condition in which black people in this country exist in the lowest status of society, but throughout the world. So when we talk about the condition of black people, we can talk about those in particularly in this country, but there's not a real big difference in terms how, when we look at how those darker people across the planet, how they exist and what the source of that is.
Especially if they're in a nation that is ruled by another majority.
But even the thing is that we don't even have to talk about where black people are the majority or the minority, because even in absence of outside forces being there physically, their mind is present. So we talk about colonialism, we talk about the oppression, we talk about the control of resources. So even in absence of our former oppressor and current oppressor being there, is that they're still able, by controlling the resources, they're still oppressing.
Are you kidding me? One time when I was living in Europe, I dated a woman from Uganda. And she told me about locales, like clubs in her hometown, run by Europeans that didn't allow Africans to come into this, in an African country.
Yeah. And so with that, and I think the thing is one of the calls for justice or else was actually for us to create our own political party. And with that, part of this is in the alignment of those freedom fighters of before, and just that how we have to really begin to take separation as, I wouldn't even say an alternative, but as the solution.
That's right.
But the reality is, are we currently ready right now to separate? And if we're honest with ourselves, there's some work that we have to do.
The rapper, what's his name? Big Mike.
Yeah, Big Mike.
This video.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's like, how many of y'all know how to fish? How many of y'all can really repair a house? How many of y'all would know what to do if the lights went off in the house? How many of y'all are taking a martial arts?
Once or twice weekly. Hands down. Now you see how many hands? Who farms or grows their own food right now? Hands down. You ain't ready to oppose nothing. You are as a part of this system as any white person gentrified in this city. And you can't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, because I've lived in this neighborhood long enough to know when 2 out of every 5 yards had a garden in the back.
But you know, part of that is that happened in the last 40 years, 50 years, that we've been de-skilled. Been de-skilled by the union. Black people built the entire country.
Right.
You know, even during the period of segregation, you had black resort towns.
Not even so much that we've been de-skilled. They come up with this sort of certification that then they only are the ones that have access to, which now then means that we're not certified or qualified for something.
But also de-skilled with the vocational training taken out of the schools. We just don't have those skills where we used to build. We could build a house. You can call a brother or a cousin or a friend who knew somebody who could do one part of building the house, and you had another part, because we had these skills in our community. We don't have those skills anymore, but that's by design.
Right.
And so those are some things we really have to regain again. And I said that in regards to Big Mike's video, is that was, systematically done, the de-skilling of African people.
But the thing with that is that the reality is not that those skills are absent from our community. And one of the things that we push with the Collective 9 is really a new educational paradigm. Is that really looking at what is our goal and being more scientific and mathematical and logical about where do we want to find ourselves in the next 20 years, right? What is that reality that we would like to see our people in, and then reverse engineering.
Sure.
And I mean, it may seem like I'm oversimplifying it, but that's the reality, is where do we want to go, and what is it that we need to do? What is it that we need to have so that we can get there?
Interesting point. There might even be some de-evolution that's required in addition to evolution.
Well, I mean,
a bit of unlearning.
And I wouldn't want to say de-evolution though, but I guess you're right.
Okay,
Unlearning, definitely, and replacing it with something else. So, and I think that's that component of education is so key in how we begin to relook at that.
Right.
Is that not to knock college and universities and our degrees, they serve their purpose.
Right.
But at the end of the day, even as you look at education, what is it supposed to do? And I've kind of identified 3 areas in which that it should help you as an individual, it should help and empower you to be able to take care of your family, and it should empower you to make some contributions to society. So as we talk about being able to fish, as we talk about some of these skills that have been lost from our community, if we're talking about building a world for ourselves, then the value of being able to fish, the value of being able to grow food, the value of being able to raise food, the value of all of these components that we need to actually be able to become self-sufficient, are definitely needed. And one of the things, and just let me say this other point with that, is that along with those skills being lost in our community, not only have we not been taught, but we have also been pushed away from. So that now to be able to be a carpenter is looked down upon. To be able to grow food so you can eat is looked down upon. The whole concept of the farm.
Well, funny these days with the collapsing economy, everybody knows the carpenters and the tradesmen seem to be doing better than the office workers. So that might change.
Yeah.
Those who are unionized.
Right.
Yeah, which is part of the unions were the de-skilling agent.
Right.
Right, by locking us out.
Before we run out of time, let's kind of bring this back. Okay, what kind of education has to happen, since we talked about elections and we started this conversation with the electoral process and how this, in a sense, European design system may not have been working for, you know, people of African descent. What kind of education should we instill in order to be able to make this a process? Because as you say, we can't just completely walk away and ignore the process of the state. So what needs to happen? Either one of y'all or both, but we definitely want to make sure both.
I'll start and let you close this out. But I think that the one is, many would say that, or have an impression that those in the Nation of Islam, that we just don't vote. The point that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad really pushes, that, as Brother Kamm mentioned earlier, is that we shouldn't vote if we don't know what we're voting for. He was totally opposed to us being ignorant voters. So with that is that I think the first thing is that we have to be very clear on what our self-interest is. And sometimes, we end up being pawns in many instances, being manipulated and moved around for someone else's self-interest. So I think it's very important that we're very clear on what our goal is and what do we expect to get out of that. And, you know, being able to make assessments on what, or if anything, we're willing to give up. And I think that we find ourselves in these positions in which we get a small gain, but at what price? You know,
some of us get a job,
right? For example, right. But at the expense of you getting this job, what is the increase in suffering for the masses of our people? So, you know, we make these sacrifices in many instances, and a few people benefit, but we don't necessarily see those who continue to suffer, and in many instances, the increase in suffering of our people. So I think, if I had to sum it up, is that we have to be very clear on what our self-interests are and where we're trying to go and what we need to do to get there.
I totally agree with that, and I just want to add that as a student of Amos Wilson, Dr. Amos Wilson, he posits in his opening paragraph, opening introduction of the book Blueprint for Black Power, is why do white people do what they do to black people? And there's all these, you know, theories of, you know, white people come from the Arctic area and black people from the southern area, fear genetic annihilation. But you know, and there's many others. But the root to why white people do what they do is because they had the power to do it. Simple as that. And if we want to stop them from doing what they do to us, or we want to do what we want to do for ourselves, self-determined, we have to build power. Enough to neutralize theirs and enough to promote our own issues and agendas. And so I think we have to have a strategic educational process around power. How to amass it, how to assemble it, how to utilize it, how to wield it, how to protect it. Because there's been many aspects of our sojourn in America where we built economic power, we built social power, we built political power. But we didn't keep it. We didn't hold on to it. We didn't protect it. We didn't defend it. And so we have to, and a lot of people don't even know about those instances where we had this power. So I think we have to have a new and a targeted focus on educating for power.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that one of the things I'm really happy with about this particular discussion, it definitely shows that there are, in a sense, a lot of ways to get to the same thing, or another way of saying it, as you had mentioned before. There's the way that I like to, or I've heard it described, unity without uniformity. That's the best way to describe it. And I think this is the prime example of that. So I want to thank you two brothers, Kamm Howard, my brother Troy X. I'm Loren Taylor, and this is definitely not going to be the last one of these. Thank you very much.
So last.
They don't really know what's up. So I saw you waking them up. Time to wake up.
Security force and their own food force in this community. Black people, I love you.
I'm taking a lunch. Why I gotta think about leaving the house without a gun? Cause this world getting crazy, I'm thinking I'm on a run. Always see me looking right to left. They keep us at the bottom cause my people high in debt. Now they don't wanna hear the truth.